Early 2024 brings with it one of the most anticipated games of the year and one of the most anticipated single-player RPGs we've seen in years. This game being Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, I never played the first game, but some of the systems shared between these two games is why I'm so excited for Dragon's Dogma 2, and the most interesting of all of these systems is what I want to go over in this video, that system being pawns. Now, Dragon's Dogma's pawn system is one of the most unique follower or companion system I've ever seen in an RPG. And it's not only a very compelling companion system, but it also ties in a slight multiplayer element because a lot of these pawns you're going to have helping you are going to be made by other players. So in Dragon's Dogma 2, you play as an Arisen. That is the character you create at character creation. You're known as Arisen. But then part of the way through the main campaign, you'll come across your first Riftstone. And this is where you'll make your main pawn. And your main pawn is also another character you get to create. You get to fully customize your main pawn, choose their vocation, which is basically the classes of Dragon's Dogma. You even get to choose their inclination, which will change how they react to any situation in the game. And your main pawn will be your main companion that you progress throughout the entirety of the game with. But after you've created your own main companion, you're also able to get up to 2 additional companions through a player network. Now, the hiring system is one of the most interesting elements of pawns because of how it interacts with all of the other elements that make up a pawn, which we'll go over later in this video. But at this Riftstone, you'll also be able to hire up to 2 additional pawns, and these are the main pawns of other players. So if you go through and look at all these different pawns and find one you want to hire, that will be somebody else's main pawn that they customized and created. And likewise, someone can hire your main pawn. Now, you won't lose your pawn when someone hires it, but you will probably get a message or a notification when they're done using that pawn, and you'll be able to do things like give those pawns a rating and basically give feedback on how useful that pawn was. Now, you'll be able to hire any pawns that are of your level or lower for free, but if you try to hire pawns that are higher level than you, you have to pay a cost, which are called Rift Crystals, and this is a more rare in-game currency. So you'll not only be able to actually spend additional currency to try to get a higher level pawn to help you out in your game, but other people can also try to hire your pawn, and you may be able to make some currency from that. Now, so far, the pawn system probably sounds like a normal customizable companion, just that you can hire back and forth with other players, but all of the other elements present within the pawn system is what makes these elements we've already gone over so interesting. Because instead of thinking of pawns like a normal companion that just helps you fight and carry your stuff, you can think of pawns in Dragon's Dogma 2 more like a guide. Because pawns will actually learn as you experience more content throughout the game. So if you go through, say, a side quest line and your pawn's there with you the whole way, they will learn different things through that scenario. And then when someone hires your pawn and, say, tries to go do that same side quest, your pawn will actually be giving them information and kind of guiding them through that side quest. And from listening to some of the developer interviews, it sounds like they want the system to kind of be a mix between a normal AI companion, but also bringing in some elements as if you were playing with another real person. Because say if you're playing another RPG with another human, they may have done another quest you've never done, so they would somewhat guide you through this quest if you were playing with one of your friends. And that's kind of what they're trying to do with pawns. So they're not only just going to help you in combat, they're also going to help you throughout different elements of the world through quests. Maybe they saw a chest somewhere that you didn't see and they would let you know and tell you, hey, there's a chest over there. Or maybe they know there's a bunch of resources in this field over here. They would tell you that. They would help you navigate the world. And you'll also be able to choose what they're calling specializations for your pawn. And an example they gave is your pawn is able to speak Elvish. So if you say walk past a group of people speaking Elvish, your pawn would then help translate that for you. So maybe you will learn more information about the possibility of starting a quest at one of those NPCs that you normally wouldn't be able to understand because your character doesn't speak Elvish, but your pawn does, so your pawn can give you that information. And there's a bunch of other options that will change your pawn's personality and give your whole playthrough additional options, because maybe maybe if you're doing a playthrough where you can't actually understand Elvish, you may never come across that side quest because you just can't understand these people actually talking. But your pawn may direct you to go do that side quest or tell you about something interesting because they can understand it. Now, pawns aren't only going to be a guide for you, but they're also going to be a character in the story of the game. And depending on how they're customized, they're going to have different reactions to different things happening in your story or different things happening through quest or in combat. Because as I mentioned, when you go create your main pawn, you get to choose an inclination for it, which will then give you a bunch of different voice options to also customize that pawn with. And the inclination will change how they react to different situations, and mixing that in with the hiring system where you'll be hiring pawns, people will be hiring your pawn. This will mean you could potentially choose an inclination for your pawn, then hire 2 other pawns that have different inclinations, and you could be running around in this party of 4 where everybody has a different type of reaction to, say, a quest you just did or a monster you just fought. And the developers have also mentioned that they want these different personalities to be much more unique and varied in Dragon's Dogma 2 compared to the first game, and that even comes down to just not hearing the same voice line over and over again, and even just the voice lines that different pawns will be saying while in combat. But pawns aren't just going to be the story elements or a guide, they're also going to be helping you in combat and in your adventures throughout the game. And because you're able to choose your vocation for your pawn, which is the classes of Dragon's Dogma, there's actually going to be quite a lot of variation on your different playthroughs of the game, because you'll be choosing your vocation as the player character or the Arisen. You'll be choosing your main pawn's vocation, which you could say be a tank on your Arisen and choose a pawn that's a ranged damage dealer or even a healer. Then you always have the option of going and hiring other pawns for whatever situation you need. Maybe you come across a very dangerous creature that's just doing too much damage for you to live, and maybe you're a tank and your main pawn is a ranged damage dealer, but you just can't survive. Maybe you go and hire a pawn that's a healer, or maybe even 2 pawns that are healers to help you out in this specific fight. You could do that fight, and then maybe the other fights you're getting in, the enemies aren't as dangerous, so you don't need 2 healers anymore. You could then just go hire other pawns that are going to be better for the situation you currently find yourself in. Now, you're obviously going to have to go back to a Riftstone, and fast travel isn't super prevalent within Dragon's Dogma 2, but the amount of variation and possibility you have with having all these different options with all the pawns and mixing all the different vocations is going to be pretty staggering, and is going to allow for just a massive amount of customization and repeat playthroughs. And there's also going to be a lot of quality of life features within the system, such as things like naming your pawn, and pawns are also going to have online IDs. So if you go and hire a pawn that you really like, that you think's really good and perfect for your group, you can actually save that pawn's online ID and go search for it and hire it again if you want to later in your playthrough. And then there's going to be things like rating other players' pawns depending on how useful they were to you or how good they were. So there's going to be a lot of different elements tied into the system that does add a bit of a community or multiplayer component into the pawn system that I think does give it another element that could be quite interesting. But that's the majority of the information we have on the pawn system for Dragon's Dogma 2, and this is the system that made me the most excited for this game. This system is very unique when compared to most other companion or follower systems, and I think it's just going to add so much replayability and immersion into a big open world RPG like Dragon's Dogma 2. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.